On October 28th, 2023 at 4:24 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, calculate that for your own time zone, we've got a full moon in Taurus lunar eclipse. This is one of the bigger astro events of the entire year. I've been having dreams pointing to this date for a long time, as well as it being a significant anniversary of certain major things and birthdays. I've been having clients where they all have something pointing right towards this date. So this has long been circled on my calendar as kind of a key event for humanity. We'll see how it plays out. Eclipses, they can play out over the next 6 months, but just given the heightened energy of our world right now, it does seem like things are kind of starting to come to a head. In my equinox video, I commented on how we might see the failure of some existing peace agreements or the need for some new ones. I didn't mention it specifically, but at the time, the peace agreement that I was kind of honing in on as likely to be affected was the Abraham Accords. And so I wasn't too surprised to see this stuff erupt in Israel and Palestine. I'm going to get into some of that later because there are some very exact astro hits with the Israel chart for the eclipse that we just had, as well as the next new moon in Scorpio. And it's interesting because this upcoming eclipse in Taurus acts as a kind of bridge between those two things. Now, those of you that watch these videos regularly, you know that I like to look at the Sabian Symbol as kind of a secret decoder ring of what's going on beneath the surface astrology. So I'm going to get into that, and it ties into what I'm talking about with regard to Israel and Palestine. But just for the basics on a full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. So Taurus traditionally rules the financial system. Also, it's a fixed earth sign, so it rules the body. It's interested in stability, grounding. When you have an eclipse, it ends up kind of shaking up that foundation. It's a highly charged event. And so eclipses in Taurus tend to be a little more earth-shaking than usual just because you've got that fixed sign energy. Taurus is ruled by Venus, which also covers not only beauty and like our values, but also our body, how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem. Venus played a role in the Israel-Palestine conflict. She moved from late Leo into Virgo on October 8th. Right around the time that the conflict started, Venus was in very late Leo, crossing Israel's Mars. That seems like it wouldn't really be that bad of a transit. I mean, Venus transits are usually good, but when Venus crosses a nation's Mars, it often does kind of trigger some kind of war. Probably because Venus represents values, and so when it crosses the god of war, that can trigger things based on ideological differences and values. So I don't want to turn this video into a whole political thing. I'm opposed to all wars and all genocides, and I'm hoping for peace. But just to explain some of what's been going on, Venus, the ruler of this upcoming eclipse on October 28th, was part of a trigger. I had highlighted October 8th as a really significant date because Mars was exactly going to be squaring Pluto. So Mars in Libra was exactly squaring Pluto on the 8th, the same day that Venus moved out of Leo finally into Virgo. However, Mars often acts ahead of time. And so we got things a day early where there was this major power change, power struggle at the same time that Venus had just crossed over that Israeli Mars point from the Israel natal chart. So this eclipse is tied in very tightly with the last eclipse. And all of this is really not a surprise if you're looking at different countries' natal charts for kind of what seems to be erupting in our world right now. I do have some kind of good news about some of this, but I just want to say that this is obviously a very intense time on planet Earth, and this particular eclipse on October 28th is likely to intensify some of that energy. So getting into the Sabian symbol, we always round up, and so it's Taurus 6, cantilever bridge across a deep gorge. The keynote, the conquest of separativeness through group cooperation. Dane Rudyard, the person that really unpacked a lot of these Sabian symbols and published a book about them, he goes into a further expansion of this idea and talks about how the man-made bridge built with collective skill gives substance to and demonstrates man's capacity to conquer obstacles and to achieve evolutionary continuity as well as expansion in space. So there's a lot to unpack there, but it's actually kind of a cool symbol in the sense that there's a bridge, but it's not just any kind of bridge, it's a cantilever bridge. And I had to look this up because I didn't really know what this was, but a cantilever bridge is an unusual structure in that it's all supported from one side. So it kind of stretches out over a space to the other side, but that other side doesn't have to be grounded. So all of that energy comes from one side. So when you think of a deep gorge, that could be, the like divisiveness of our world right now, the very different sides of so many issues and of, the conflict going on in the Middle East. That could be one expression, but it could also be an expression of kind of what I've been talking about for months, which is these two different realities. It's like there's the apparent reality, but then there's this other reality that appears to be coming into deeper form. And that reality, it kind of flickers in and out. It's showing up in a lot of people's dreams. It's showing up occasionally in these kind of synchronous, major events that you can't help but pay attention to. And yet it's like, it's not here yet. So this cantilever bridge, it's kind of like, well, we're all on the one side, and it allows the crossing over from one side to the other. So that's a big deal. And I feel a very encouraging thing about this particular full moon in Taurus. So despite the shakiness of what could be happening. Now, I'm going to put the chart up here because there's so much going on with this. So one of the things, this is a chart pulled for Washington, D.C., and you'll see that Neptune is right there on the Washington, D.C. ascendant. So that's how the U.S. presents to the world. And with Neptune there, it could be there's some sort of deception. There could be a dissolution of how our government is viewed by the world. It could also involve kind of a disillusion of, things that have seemed to, what's been said versus how things are. It could become more apparent. So that's something to note. The other thing to note is that in the October 14th solar eclipse in Libra, that one happened right on Israel's ascendant. So we're seeing ascendants showing up as significant in these eclipses. Okay, so back to the chart. There are a few things. Mars at 11 Scorpio exactly opposes Jupiter at 11 Taurus. Now, when we get to the new moon in Scorpio, Mars is going to exactly oppose Uranus. So Mars is very active and has been all along for these last few months, but especially in recent weeks. So we've got that energy there, Mars opposite Jupiter, that could intensify, cries for war, or Jupiter being the planet of, the big ideas, the philosophy or religion. We could see an increase in kind of fundamentalist rhetoric at the time of this eclipse. But I want to say that the new moon in Scorpio that's coming up 2 weeks after this has the most amazing Sabian symbol unpack that I've ever done. So although stuff is starting to look worse and worse and worse, we may find that there's something is not as it appears, and that cantilever bridge allows us to move across this very difficult and deep gorge. So another thing to look at in the chart, looking from Capricorn, we've got a little cluster there that exactly trines this eclipse. So we've got Pholus, Quaa, and Cupedo at 5 and 6 degrees Capricorn. I've talked about Pholus a lot because Pholus is kind of the small thing, big effect centaur associated with kind of that butterfly effect. So where you have something in your life, or when something occurs that seems like a small event somewhere, and then it triggers something bigger and, like much more expansive somewhere else. That energy is supportively trining this eclipse, 120 degrees. Then Quaa that's an energy that is, it has kind of a Scorpio energy. There's kind of like a death and rebirth. There's a loss of something and then a return of something. With Quaa in Capricorn, we're talking about kind of a death and rebirth of structures. So we may see some of that. Again, an eclipse can unfold over the next 6 months. So we might not see it all right on October 28th, but these things are definitely in the mix. The other thing that's in the mix goes with something that I've also been tracking with a bunch of clients and just sort of reading the tea leaves, so to speak, of these kind of seemingly orchestrated relationships that seem like they're coming into being around the same time that the rest of the world's kind of going nuts. And so some of these are collaborations, some of these are partnerships in business, or partnerships in like creative projects. Again, Venus rules Taurus, and so we've got that energy of creativity, of bringing things into form, and that's amplified by the Capricorn energy, which is another earth sign that likes to, bring things down into tangible form. So with Cupedo there, we've got that idea of like Cupid's arrow in mythology. So, kind of a heavenly orchestration of earthly connections, earthly relationships. So just know that in addition to everything going on with this full moon, we've got that nice trine coming with kind of a big time change with Quaa. We've got that small thing, big effect, Pholus, igniting stuff. And then we've got this orchestration of relationships from above. So that's happening at the time of this eclipse. And then, as I mentioned, the Israel natal chart's ascendant was very close to the eclipse degree for the October 14th solar eclipse. So the solar eclipse was at 21 degrees Libra, and Israel's natal chart's ascendant is at 23 degrees Libra. And of course, the South Node was also very close to that point. What that means is that the Israel descendant, so the cusp of the house of relationships, of marriage, but also the house of known enemies. That's another thing that seventh house means. The descendant is, of course, the cusp of the seventh house. So the North Node is right there. Eris, the goddess of discord, is right there. She's the one that triggered the Trojan War. And we've also got a nice alignment at the time of this October 28th eclipse, which is Panacea. So Panacea is the goddess of the universal cure. And so, yes, we've got the war energy there. It's definitely like right there, especially with Israel at this time. However, there is this kind of universal cure that's like moving in with that North Node destiny point. Now, that could specifically affect things in the Middle East, but it also could just continue to affect all of us because it's the transiting North Node destiny point. So that's the destiny of the collective right now is trending in that direction. So there's discord, but there is also some sort of panacea, some sort of universal cure for that. So that's encouraging. Also, keep in mind, even though the North Node is in Aries right now, and the eclipse is in Taurus, so it's an out of sign eclipse. But this is a North Node eclipse, which means that this is very future oriented. So the October 14th eclipse was past oriented. It was like, what do we have to give up? What do we get rid of? Maybe those old peace agreements. Nope, no more. And of course, that whole week being so intense with all the transits, with Pluto stationing direct and Mars squaring Pluto, Venus changing signs after crossing over that Israel-Mars point. So there was a lot more kind of negative intensity around the time of the solar eclipse. But this October 28th full moon lunar eclipse has this kind of future orientation with that bridge from where we are now to where we need to be. Or another way to look at that, the bridge from the south node kind of karma, past energy to the north node energy of the future and where we need to be heading. So lots of energies here in the mix. Another thing to keep in mind is, and this is another tie-in to the October 14th eclipse, I mentioned how it was squared by Hylonomy, and that Hylonomy, she was at 22 degrees Capricorn at the time of that eclipse, so squaring the Libra eclipse. But Hylonomy is, she was the wife of Solaris. They were centaurs. And when Solaris was killed in battle, Hylonomy was so distraught that she took the same arrow and, killed herself with it. So there was this, suicidal kind of intensity connected with the October 14th eclipse. That's still sort of in the mix for this one. In this case, Solaris is at 6 degrees Leo, so squaring the 5 to 6 degree Taurus eclipse happening on October 28th. And Solaris being Hylonomy's husband, again, that story is kind of running in the background at the same time that we've got this influence from Cupedo creating new relationships. And so we could see a shuffling of things, kind of a shuffling of the deck of alliances, of romantic relationships, of collaborative partnerships. There's something going on where things are being taken away, but at the same time, with this future orientation, there's some sort of antidote to it, this panacea of kind of the universal cure coming in to try to solve and not like replace in the sense that, if it's a life lost or the end of a relationship, nothing is quite going to replace that. But it's like something new comes in and it kind of takes the edge off. It takes the sting off as we move forward. So again, that's in the mix, and these eclipses can play out over the next 6 months, but I've been seeing this just circled, this date, for so long that wanted to kind of bring in some of that. So another thing to keep in mind is at the sun point of this lunar eclipse, so 6 degrees Scorpio, we've got Rhadamanthus, and it might be Rhadamanthus, but he was a wise king of Crete and a judge of the underworld. So Scorpio, of course, rules the underworld, and so we've got this king of Crete who was a wise judge of the underworld. So I'm not going to get too much into him, but it just kind of adds to the sense that there's something more going on. There's something happening behind the scenes, below the surface, and it's likely to bring some additional kind of order and sense of justice that appears to be completely lacking right now. It appears to be just completely out of our reach. But again, at the time of this eclipse, there's that cantilever bridge across that deep gorge. So even if something seems totally out of reach, it could happen. Hang on tight. Don't get too discouraged by what you see happening in our world. Obviously, this is a time to make tangible, earthy steps to shore up your own preparedness. My husband has 4 planets in Taurus, and One of his favorite mottos is better to have and not need than to need and not have. So when we're approaching a potentially earthquakey kind of eclipse in Taurus, maybe have some extra supplies on hand, do your little preparations. But I do want to just reiterate that there's something bigger going on. There are so many plot lines, so many stories that are all kind of coming to a head right now. And the things that I'm seeing as at least potentials, at least things that are very tangibly in the mix, sometimes using, again, kind of the secret decoder ring of the Sabian symbols, and sometimes just looking at the astrology itself. There is room for hope. There is cause to tend to your own earthy element, tend to your own home, to your own structures, your own physical reality, but to do so from a place of inspiration, so that you are able to bridge that gap between how things currently are and how you might like to see them. We can't avoid everything negative that's happening in our world right now, but we can transmute things. We can approach things in such a way that we're able to extract the best version of ourselves. We're able to present the best version of ourselves, and in a sense, work together to collectively build that bridge into the future. So until next time, you guys take care, and lots of love. Bye.